inviting me to speak on this subject. Many of you will have heard of what we call farm clusters or facilitated groups. For those that haven't heard about this way of working, let me take you back a few years and we can see how this farmer-led landscape scale conservation and collaboration really kicked off and came into being. So in 2020, the government funded some nature improvement areas, one of which was in the Marlborough Downs. And this involved a group of farmers led by a farmer committee with a trusted advisor that they chose themselves, Gemma Batten. And it was a big success. GWCT, who had been supporting the project, were interested to see if this would work elsewhere without NIA funding. So we set up 5 pilot farmer clusters in 2013. And what we found was that farmers could collaborate. There were enormous potential benefits for biodiversity, soil and water, as well as community engagement and local business opportunities. But they really needed an advisor, some glue, and a sort of facilitator to keep them all on the straight and narrow, as it were. So Natural England responded to the GWCT pilot report and various other landscape scale initiatives by creating the Countryside Stewardship Facilitation Fund, which really helped the initiative take off. So, I mean, it's just exploded. We've got, well, over 100 of these landscape scale groups. They're not on the map, but there are some in Wales and Scotland now. So this has really exploded. It's very exciting. Thousands of farmers involved, over 500,000 hectares, and it'll be interesting to see how many more have been added to the list since the 2019 round of the Facilitation Fund. So, unsurprisingly, the scale and potential of the cluster movement has been noticed by government, and this way of working features in the 25-year Environment Plan. It's also being referred to throughout the ELMS discussion document. You can see there more effective delivery if we join up. A lot of the tests and trials actually feature farmer clusters, and tier 3 very much geared towards landscape scale as well. And it's refreshing to see a section in the ELMS discussion document on lessons learned, in particular a mention of the fact that land managers must have access to effective advice, and that within a cluster is a really good way of delivering that advice. Many of us who are involved with clusters have been out promoting farmer-led collaboration in farmer media, social media. We've had 2 farmer cluster conferences, and when this COVID thing is out the way, hopefully we can have another one. CLA Rural Business, NFU Environment Conference. We've had visits from Defra and Manette, president of the NFU. So the idea is well circulated now. After the first Farm Cluster Conference we had in conjunction with Natural England, we sent out a questionnaire to all facilitators, and the main outcome of this was the need and the request for a central resource online and a way to help new groups start and offer support and inspiration to existing groups. So we've created this and have had a number of partners helping us and contributing to its growth and its development. So definitely check it out and let us know what you think. Sign up to the newsletter, there's a blog, so please do engage with that, and if you've got a profile, keep it up to date. Also an online resource coming up in development. The Land app and partners are working on a map of farm groups, which is hoped will be very useful for linking people with initiatives if they're in their local area, like Three Keels Landscape Enterprise Networks, Environment Bank, as Jenny Phelps outlined in the first session, which was interesting. So if you've missed that, catch up on it. But Land app is linked with UK habitat classification maps, which makes it very useful for conservationists. It's also linked to RPA for farm and estate management, and even it's got potential, for stewardship applications to be managed through Land app. So I definitely encourage facilitators and farmers to check that out. So now I'm going to talk through an example. The Martin Down Farmer Cluster is the group that I look after. on the edge of Wiltshire, Dorset and Hampshire, and we closely abut 2 other farmer clusters to make the Martin Down supercluster. And you can see Martin Down National Nature Reserve in the centre there in red, and surrounding it like spokes for the hub of a wheel, we've got 3 groups, one of which was one of the original pilots. It's called Allenford Farmer Cluster, and that's one in orange, headed up by Rob Shepherd. And then in 2016, Chalk Valley, which is the green area, facilitated by Simon Smart, entered and was accepted into the facilitation fund. And Martin Down was born in the same year, but Martin Down and Allenford are independently funded. So we all surround the nature reserve. We've got similar aims and target species, some of which are illustrated there. And we try and work together as closely as possible to try and better buffer that nature reserve and the wildlife to be able to move around the region once more. It's about 236 square kilometres, that area, and that is, I think we'll all agree, landscape scale. So the Martin Down Farm Cluster has 12 farms in it at the moment. We have quarterly pub meetings, at least 6 training events, social events and farm walks per year. We've got a friends group which is made up of local villagers who can get involved with the project. They can attend events, help me with surveys, that type of thing. We have a particular emphasis on monitoring species, and we monitor over a dozen of our target species on this area because GWCT has the resource to do that. So we very much hope that since our big baseline in 2017, this can be a long-term study. So these are some of our early findings from our monitoring. Some stuff is going in the right direction, some is all over the place thanks to the beast from the east and the crazy summer heat wave of 2018, I suppose. But this reiterates the need for long-term data. So all this is presented and it's explained to the farmers along with positive feedback and encouragement and conservation advice. So they get this in a report every year, and actually if anyone's interested to see the type of report that I give them, I'm happy to share a redacted version that the farmers have given me permission to do. So this really accelerated farmers' learning, their understanding of their own farms, and a drive to conserve in their local area. So as a sort of summary of what conservation action has happened since 2017, we've put around 200 acres, 80 hectares in of new habitats, grass buffer strips, flower margins, beetle banks, arable flora margins, which also function as turtle dove plots because we've got one of the last remaining populations of turtle doves in the south, arable reversions, nectar flower mixes, wild birdseed plots, supplementary feeding, nest boxes and predation control. As an example of how we put this into practice, this is the northwest corner of the cluster area. You've got 2 different farms there. At one end of the cluster is Garston Woodtreple SI, which is a woodland managed by the RSPB. And then Kitsgrave is the northern end of Martin Down. And in the middle we've got private woodland and arable reversion, which is wildlife rich. And both farms decided to do a coordinated landscape scale mid-tier application, and you can see how much of a network of wildlife corridors have been put in there if I flick this animation. And this is a mixture of all those types of habitats that I've just outlined. You can also see in the top a slightly different coloured farm. That's actually a farm in the Chalk Valley. So we've got to think sometimes a little bit bigger than our own cluster. The next point, I just want to go into an example of how we can collaborate, not just between farmers, but within other parties as well, with the example of the small blue. So it's a very small butterfly. Its sole food plant is the kidney vetch. And on the map of the cluster there, you can see some black dots. And apart from Martin Down, you can see that we've got 4 sites within the cluster area where they are likely to breed or confirmed breeding. So we'd very much like to help those re-establish across the cluster area if we can, and we have got some good potential areas. We've just got to reintroduce kidney vetch using a variety of butterfly banks, wildflower margins and arable reversions. So here is an example of partnership to achieve this. On the end there you can see Roger and Claire, some farmers, they put in a pond, generated a large amount of spoil, which they created 2 large butterfly banks with. So we thought, what should we do with that? Well, we'll turn it into a micro habitat for small blue. They're quite enterprising little butterflies, so even though this is over 1 kilometre from Martindown, we reckon they're going to find it. So we've got to establish kidney vetch. So in partnership with the NNR and the Warden, which is partly managed by Natural England, partly managed by Council, we collected some seed, kidney vetch seed. Then one of the members of our friends group, Jill, offered to grow some of that seed into plug plants for us. So the plugs are on there, the seed is on there, and it's all growing really well. That's a picture of one of the plugs. And throughout the whole process, I've been involved advising and facilitating those 4 parties to better create this habitat for small blue. And if we can get, 4 or 5 new sites for small blue in the next few years, that will be a significant achievement for this threatened butterfly in our cluster area. Now, I'm no psychologist, but I've learned a lot from working with a diverse group of people, and psychology and people management is half the challenge in this type of project. And if many projects are anything like mine, there will be challenges. So to overcome them, you need to build the trust, you need to build relationships. One-to-one advice is just as important as one-to-many. Find what makes people tick, listen, encourage and reward. And I don't think there's been enough encouragement and enough reward in agri-environment schemes to date. So hopefully this way of working, this attitude, this bottom-up principle has to be easier in ELMS. It has to be embraced within ELMS. Some final thoughts then. So as I was saying about those resources that are available, and the Land App Farmer Cluster website and the advisory service here at GWCT are here to help new and existing groups and anyone with an interest in farmer-led collaboration and landscape scale conservation. Surveying and positive feedback, definitely in our experience, a catalyst for progress. Collaboration will feature strongly in ELMS, and groups are well placed to trade in natural capital and receive private sector funding. Tim's asked me to chair a roundtable discussion on the 19th of May from 11:45, just for an hour, featuring some great people. Rob Shepherd, who's one of my farmer chairmen from the other cluster I look after, Gemma Batten from the Marlborough Downs, Brian MacDonald, who heads up the Facilitation Fund, James Phillips from Natural England Nature Recovery Team, who's been extremely supportive of our Martindown project, AJ Paul, who spoke at the first Farmer Cluster Conference, farmer and facilitator, and our CEO, Teresa Dent, from the Game and Wildlife Conservation Trust, who's also on the Natural England board. So that will be a really, really good discussion. Finally, we joined Twitter not too long ago, so we'd love you to engage on Twitter, follow us, see what we're up to, and thank you very much for listening.